Hello everyone, welcome to our new episode of Sociopodcast. I'm Daniela Marin and today I'm here with Julián Castaño, Juan Manuel Castaño and Juan Grisales. In this space, we will explore the relationship between sustainability, linguistic diversity and cultural preservation in Colombia. To start, we will analyze the role of institutions such as Universidad Tecnológica de Pereira in promoting the Sustainable Development Goals through environmental initiative, quality education, and social commitment. Through the discussion, Sociopodcast aims to highlight the strong connection between biodiversity, language preservation, and sustainable development in contemporary society. So, hello Julián, could you start talking about goals of sustainability that UTP has?
Hello everyone. Yes, of course, Daniela. Well, let's talk about these goals of the university, with the fact that Universidad Tecnológica de Pereira, or UTP, is among the universities that contribute the most to the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, in Colombia, according to the Impact Ranking. The UTP is part of the group of 27 Colombian institutions included in the Times Higher Education's Impact Ranking, a classification that evaluates universities' commitment to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals established by the United Nations. In this edition, 2,318 universities from around the world participated.
Julián, could you tell us the actions that you have it?
Yes, of course, Daniela. These recognitions reflect the actions undertaken by UTP in key areas, for example, guaranteeing access to reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Also, promoting inclusive, equitable, and quality education with lifelong learning opportunities. Fighting hunger, improving nutrition, and encouraging sustainable agriculture. And finally, strengthening global partnership for sustainable development. Actually, UTP was placed within the 1,001 to 1,500 range in the global ranking, with an overall score of 57.6. Among the initiatives highlighted by the UTP's contribution to environmental sustainability and the conservation of plant and animal species, with an impact both inside and outside the campus, activities related to solid waste collection, wastewater management through treatment plants, and the research carried out by its laboratories in these fields were also recognized. The impact ranking measures how universities contribute to the SDGs through their real impact on society.
That's great, Julián. And continue with the episode, we want to talk about other topics, about linguistic and ecological diversity. So for this topic, we have a special guest. Juan, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for the invitation. Of course, my dear people. Language diversity, the connection between the loss of the language and the loss of the biodiversity, comes down to a connect scientists called biocultural diversity. Simply put, nature and culture are deeply intertwined. When an indigenous language dies, the localized ecosystem knowledge it carries disappears with it. Here is exactly how the two crises are linked. Linguistic diversity and biological diversity physically exist in the exact same place. The world's primary biodiversity hotspots like Amazonas Basin, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia are also home to the highest concentration of unique language. As external forces like deforestation, industrial agriculture, and climate change destroy these physical habits, they simultaneously displace the indigenous communities living there, disrupting the traditional way of life and forcing language abandonment. In this space, we are going to talk about how the loss of language is related to the loss of the biodiversity. Language are not just different connections of words, they are unique worldwide. Indigenous languages have highly specialized vocabularies for local nature that don't exist in other languages. A single language may have names and the latest description of hundreds of medical plants, explaining how they interact with other species and how they change across seasons. On the other hand, we have ecological patterns, traditional names for animals often encode their behavior, migration cycles, or exact roles in the food. So, when a community stops speaking its native tongue, this highly specific ecological data is rarely translated. It is simply forgotten. In conclusion, the new dynamics that we have changed the way that we communicate, and with that, we have lost a large part of the meaning of some indigenous language.
Excellent, Juan. Thank you so much. It is really important to understand these connections between linguistic diversity and ecology, and why we have to protect our environment to not continue this process of losing our ecological knowledge. But it would be interesting to evidence a more local example of these relationships. For this, we have our last guest. Juanma, welcome.
Hello, Daniela. Thanks for the invitation. Of course, it's necessary to analyze a more local context to understand this relationship in our own country. Well, in this case, I want to talk to you about the Saliba language, spoken mainly along the Meta River and in the department of Casanare. The Saliba language is in critical danger of extinction, or in sociolinguistic terms, it generates a language shift with Spanish, which is a process in which a person or a community gradually changes one language to another, primarily due to the lack of generational transmission or geographic displacement, and social and economic pressure to use Spanish or other predominant language. Also, the disappearance of the Saliba language implies much more than the loss of a communication system. It means the loss of a unique worldview, medicinal knowledge, maybe ancestral stories, and the irreplaceable identity of an indigenous community. And of course, it affects the ecological knowledge that the language keeps. In general, native languages store thousands of years of knowledge regarding local flora, fauna, and ecosystems. Losing Saliba language means forgetting environmental management techniques associated with Saliba's territory. Fortunately, even though the Saliba community face a dangerous risk of linguistic extinction or language shift in sociolinguistic terms, and the use of their language has diminished under pressure from Spanish, as I mentioned before, the indigenous community and various institutions are actively working to revitalize it with a process of language revival to prevent the cultural and linguistic death of these people or community. And community educational projects and mandatory teaching of the language starting from preschool are being implemented. Additionally, documentation tools exist such as the Saliba Spanish Dictionary designed for its preservation. In sociolinguistic words, this is a formal language maintenance, so we can be sure right now that the efforts are being made for revitalize and maintain this really important language for our country.
Thank you, Juanma, for contributing to these topics that are so valuable to society. So, in conclusion, today's discussion allowed us to understand that sustainability is not only related to environmental protection, but also to the preservation of cultures, languages, and ancestral knowledge, as we heard through the examples shared by your guests. Linguistic diversity and ecological diversity are deeply connected. When an indigenous language disappears, humanity also loses unique ways of understanding nature, traditional ecological practices, and important cultural identities. The case of the Saliba language shows us how globalization, social pressure, and the lack of intergenerational transmission can place an ancestral language at risk of extinction. However, it also demonstrates that educational projects, communities initiative, and institutional support can contribute to its revitalization and preservation. Thank you for joining us in this episode, and we hope this conversation inspires everyone to value and preserve both our linguistic and ecological diversity.